there's physical pain, but a big symptom of pain is anxiety and depression. Another big one is if you ask a lot of chronic pain patients, what's the one thing you really want? It's socialization. So they're feeling extremely isolated. All these factors, the bio, the psychosocial, incredibly affect your everyday functionality and your overall health. And I think until you can understand yourself in the biopsychosocial model, you're not really seeing yourself holistically. Hi, my name is Celine Tien. I'm the CEO and founder of Flowly. And today on EverForward Radio, we're talking about how to use virtual reality and biofeedback to take control of your nervous system, building a platform for people with chronic illness, and how to live and feel better each day.
Celine, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I have to ask out of the gate, someone like yourself who more or less is in the business of health and wellness, particularly mental health, and I would even say mindfulness. Is that fair?
Yeah.
But you're also a business owner. You're an entrepreneur. And I know what that's like. So I'm curious, how are you kind of walking the talk? How are you taking care of your health, your wellness, your mental health while in this kind of go entrepreneur startup phase?
Yeah, that's a good question because I think it's really hard to walk that balance. And I will say I'm probably not the best person at it either. But you know what's really helpful is that I have two co-founders and a really amazing team, and we remind each other to, for example, use our own product, use Flowly, or take a breath, or even take a day off to like reset ourselves, reset our nervous system. And I think that speaks to the power of community, which has been something that I keep coming back to in our work, but also just in my own life. And so I think that community aspect has probably been one of the most important things for myself in terms of balancing between, really crazy, hectic startup life and my own wellness.
What does a good community look like in your world? When you say community, what does that mean?
Yeah. For me, my personal, and I think there's a few ways I think about it. I think of it kind of in concentric circles. Like I have my really close family and friends it's my close community. And then I have like the larger community of like maybe farther out friends or people that have helped me along the way. And then even people that I serve in that larger circle. In my smallest circle, I think that community for me means a circle of people I really trust and then are always looking out for me even when I don't look out for myself. Yeah.
That's really important.
Yeah.
Do you receive that when they do, I'll say, call you out? When, hey, we're checking in on you because maybe we're noticing you're not checking in on yourself. How good are you at receiving that? And what does that look like for you?
I think I've been working on it. I think that
room to grow.
Yeah, there's room to grow as usual, but I think I've gone better at receiving that. And one thing that has actually really changed, I think, my life in totality was during COVID. So the past like 2-3 years, somebody in my family got very sick. Actually, 2 members of my family got really sick, and I and my mom became basically primary caregivers for 2 very sick members of my household.
It was that serious, huh?
Very, very serious. One of my family members passed away. And
I'm so sorry
I think, it was very challenging, but I think that experience really changed my outlook about like community, and then how do we remind ourselves to always be stepping up for each other and also ourselves. And it made me more open to feedback too about like how do I navigate my relationships with people in my community, but also with my own health.
Again, I'm sorry for your loss, but I love hearing that.
Yeah.
And I know it doesn't come easy. And I was even sharing with you before we recorded the meaning behind EverForward and why we're here today, why I'm here today, came from a significant loss.
Yeah.
And everybody's on their own path and on their own time to be open to even thinking of what meaning could be in this loss. But when you can get there, everything becomes, I won't say easier, but you realize at least what the next step is.
Yeah.
And so I'm so glad that at least you're kind of there.
Yeah. And it was very challenging, but I think not to minimize sort of like the trauma or the experience of it all, but I do think that it did help me become a better person at the end of the day. Yeah.
I like to believe so as well.
Yeah.
Well, you already kind of said the F word, which is what we're here to talk about. For those of you tuning in, watching the video, which please check out the video. You can find it at everforwardradio.com or check us out on YouTube. This device right here I'm checking out is Flowly, this VR headset that I was sharing with you. I actually did 2 sessions today.
Cool.
While like the tech guy in me, the quantified self guy in me, the health advocate, personally and professionally, is so excited about this. It also made me kind of think about, I guess, devil's advocate. Do we need something like this? Do we need yet another piece of technology? You know, maybe I'm a different animal, but you know, I've got a Whoop, I got an Apple Watch, I've got smart devices out the wazoo. Do we need another piece of tech to help our wellness, particularly our mental health here? And we're going to dive into all the other specs that this thing can do, but why tech for this application?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and it's something that we've wrestled with, especially when we were developing it out. And I think what we've come to is that, especially for the population we had designed Flowly for, it is absolutely necessary to have the VR component, the virtual reality component.
And who is that population?
And that population was for people with chronic pain and chronic illness.
Okay.
So we didn't design Flowly to be like this general meditation, mindfulness tool that anybody could pick up. Of course you can. However, we designed this out of my own experience growing up around pancreatic cancer. And for some people who may know this, pancreatic cancer is extremely painful. It's extremely anxiety inducing for both the patient, but also the caregivers and family involved. And in that process, I think what we really learned is that when you are in pain, it is really hard to ask you to close your eyes and meditate and focus in on your body. That's where all your pain, all your stress, all your anxiety is. I mean, even for myself, I don't have a chronic illness, but it was really hard for me to meditate. And both what we found in our own studies, but also in previous studies in this space, virtual reality creates a really immersive medium for people to focus in on their body, but by focusing on something outside of their body.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you're building a bridge to maybe you can get there to just, I mean, because honestly, for the end result here, for meditation, for mindfulness, we don't need this. We don't need a lot of tools. We don't need a lot of things, because it is just a matter of us choosing to carve out space and time to be still and to go inward. But you hit the nail on the head. For a lot of people, specifically with high stress, high anxiety, high pain, when you do that, you're even more aware of the pain and suffering that you're probably in.
You are more aware. And then one other thing I'll bring into the fold here is there is sort of the distraction element. That's what I'm talking about with the virtual reality, the high stimulus immersive environment that you can focus in on. But the second thing that I will say I think is even more core to using VR is that VR helps you learn techniques and therapies faster. Because it is a gamified and high stimulus environment, your brain is able to make new neural connections and pathways in a way that it can't without that sort of environment. And they've actually shown VR in studies where it was VR plus like a biofeedback training, which we can get into more later, with just VR, with just a computer, or without a screen at all. And the group that used VR experienced much more significant improvement because of the immersive and gamified environment in virtual reality.
Yeah, the biofeedback component here, I think, is, in my opinion, like the secret sauce, because you provide an experience, and you know, we can get biofeedback in a lot of other ways, but what you all have done here that I love is kind of have this immersive experience simultaneously getting biofeedback. So please, for maybe the listener or viewer who doesn't understand that term, what do you mean by biofeedback?
Yeah.
What is actually happening in that process? And I know we've come a long way in biofeedback, going from, quote, supercomputers that are like the size of this room to something that quite literally can fit in your hand.
Yeah, so biofeedback has been used since even a little bit before the 1980s, clinically in research and application. And essentially what it is a type of training and therapy where traditionally what would happen is you'd go into a specialist's office, they'd hook you up to a bunch of sensors like on your fingers, on your arms, on your head. You'd be looking at data like brain waves, heart rate, skin conductance, which is like sweat. And then a specialist will be walking you through relaxation exercises. So you're learning basically how to relax. And on the screen in front of you, you actually see graphs of how your body's doing. So you literally see your heart rate going down, you see your brain waves quieting, you see your skin conductance lowering. And what you're learning is with this like closed feedback loop, how to on command basically shift your body into its rest and digest mode. So your parasympathetic nervous system.
So like lowering heart rate, lowering, or really kind of shifting more into that rest and digest, like you said. But what we're also doing there is training heart rate variability, lowering cortisol, a lot of things that can work then and there, but have compounding effects once we step out of that experience.
Yeah, exactly. So what we essentially do, so in totality, Flowly is designed for people with chronic pain and chronic illness, teaching them how to auto-regulate their nervous system. Because what that means is most people with a chronic illness or pain or anxiety, you're living in what we call sustained fight or flight mode. Yeah. So your sympathetic fight or flight mode is constantly on, right? Like your heart rate is probably higher. Everything seems like a threat, whether you consciously or subconsciously perceive it as such. And your body is very inflamed. And essentially what we're teaching you to do is through the biofeedback, teach you how to on command shift into your parasympathetic rest and digest mode so that your body can actually physiologically step back, relax, and even sleep and recover better. And the way that we teach you to do that is through, in virtual reality, we actually show you your heart rate graph. And then we teach you through breath work and gamification and even some psychoeducation in the voiceover how to essentially on command increase something called your heart rate variability. And your heart rate variability is an incredible index for basically control of your parasympathetic, your rest and digest mode.
I was listening to another interview we were on recently, and you had this amazing analogy of HRV that I never heard. And literally, quite as I just said out of my mouth, I'm drawing.
Is it the athlete one, the Olympian?
No, you were on. I don't know if you remember this. It was the Femtech. Oh my gosh! I wonder if I made a note about it.
I can kind of I can describe the way I usually describe HRV.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it was so well said, and now I'm looking like an idiot. But it was. But if you could kind of describe HRV, what is heart rate variability, and maybe this analogy will pop up.
Yeah, so HRV stands for heart rate variability. And one thing is when people think of heart rate and they hear heart rate, they think, oh, you should have like a low average heart rate. Yes, that's typically the case. But average heart rate is your heart rate averaged over a period of time. What actually happens is your heart rate is going up and down at any given moment. So actually when you inhale, your heart speeds up. And then when you exhale, your heart slows down. That's a good thing. That's your body at work. The way that I like to explain it is heart rate variability is actually the difference between your heartbeats, right? It's a variance in time between your heartbeats. And let's say today you were an Olympic athlete, like you were top of your game, you're super fit. If you're getting ready to run your race, your heart rate immediately speeds up, right? Because it's getting your body into really heightened activated nervous system mode. It's getting your heart rate up, your muscle tensions are up, you're ready to sprint to that race. So it's getting ready to perform. Now, as soon as they're done with the race, the athlete is immediately able to lower their heart rate because that means that their body is then able to perform and then immediately relax, immediately recover. So you see that high variation, that going up and then the going down. Most of us, unfortunately, today, we are not that Olympic athlete. Our heart rate isn't speeding up for us to perform and then certainly not slowing down for us to recover. And so what happens is our heart rate is just kind of like chugging along at the same pace and it's not really serving us. That is a low HRV, a low heart rate variability. So what we teach you to do is essentially how to manipulate your heart rate such that it increases to perform and then decreases to recover and create that beautiful sort of what we look at sinusoidal waves in your heart rate graph that show that increasing for performance, lowering for relaxation.
The analogy didn't come to mind, but a note I made about another way I heard you describe this is so beautiful. Conscious ways to affect unconscious systems.
Yeah.
The autonomic nervous system, I mean, our heart rate and breathing, thank God, just happen in the background. We don't need to sit here and think, inhale, exhale, contract, relax. But we do have the ability to kind of tap into that.
Yeah.
We do have the ability to consciously think or to use devices, technology to monitor that and to really, all right, accelerate, decelerate, accelerate, decelerate, particularly through the power of breath. Can you shine a light on what is so unique about breathing and understanding this, the term, the normal frequency?
Resonant frequency breathing. Yeah.
Yes. How really tapping into that and understanding that is the vehicle through which we can really regulate this autonomic nervous system.
Yeah. So you said it exactly. It's something we talk about all the time. Your nervous system controls all these unconscious functions, from your heart rate to your sweat to even sexual function to your thoughts. And the thing is, we're never taught in school, which I always advocate for, how do you actually control all these unconscious functions that are actually the dictators of how you feel and live every single day. And so there are a couple conscious things you can learn to do that will really directly affect these unconscious things. One of the most major ones and the easiest to kind of like introduce yourself into this world is through breath work. And yes, we can all breathe and we kind of like, breathe automatically. The thing is, most of us are, I would guess for most people listening, not breathing totally correctly, or there's definitely room for improvement in terms of breath. And the breath is really, really important because your breath can dictate a lot of things around your heart and cardiac health. So for example, we were talking about heart rate variability. How do you increase your HRV? Well, you can actually learn to breathe at a certain rate, which encourages your heart rate to speed up on the inhale and then dramatically slow down on the exhale. And that depends on the rate at which you breathe at.
Wow.
Now, across all humans, the average rate to breathe at which will increase your HRV is 6 breaths per minute. So that's about 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out. I know you have served in the Army, and it is something that they actually teach in a lot of different factions of military training.
Especially at the
performance
range.
Training, especially with different types of sniper training.
My drill sergeant definitely didn't use the term breath work, but we were coached to really focus first on dialing our breathing.
Yes.
Strong inhale, slow exhale, and only then would we fire.
And so typically what they teach you is 6 breaths per minute, because 6 breaths per minute is kind of that perfect intersection of being very relaxed but extremely focused. And so what we have learned, however, is that each person individually has a slightly different breathing rate at which they can control their HRV, and being like basically optimizing for that performance but also relaxation intersection. And so for some people, it could be 5 breaths per minute. For some people, it could be 8, 7, 6.3, whatever it is. And so in Flowly, in the first week, we actually spend a week calibrating and assessing what we call your resonant frequency breathing rate. So the breathing rate at which you're most able to control your heart rate and increase your heart rate variability.
And that was another thing that stood out to me a lot with this technology, is that you're adopting, I should say, a very common approach to what I believe the best changes in our life and our wellness are based upon. And that's first establishing baseline. When I was a health coach, I would not just immediately tell somebody, all right, do this diet, do this workout program. I would need to gather information. I would need to know what you're eating, what you're not eating, what you're doing, what you're not doing. Just gather data first.
Yeah.
And then manipulate variables. And I've never seen this approach personally to breathing, to breath work. I think a lot of times when we jump into breath work, when we jump into mindfulness, we want to calm down. We want to find some time to take a deep breath. We will just model after what is out there, whether that's box breathing or whatever breath work class we can find online. And that might serve you, that will actually help you, I think. But we're still modeling after somebody else. Yeah. And we're modeling after something that might be like a general consensus. And so again, you're going to find value, but it's not you and it's not me. And so I love that you all are going with the baseline approach and only then manipulating factors. So did you just choose that? Was it based on science? Like, why a baseline gathering and then recommendations?
Yeah, it's definitely based on science. I think, like, you know, imagine if you were feeling that way without a chronic illness. If you have a chronic illness or you have pain, your baseline is even more off, or you even have more
Absolutely.
factors to consider. So everything we do, especially with the biofeedback, is about meeting your body where it's at. So first understanding where it is at, acknowledging it, meeting it there, and then showing, okay, here are the steps you can take. And then we're going to support you along that way. So that's really important to us. But I'll kind of describe to you the sort of journey of how we got here, because I think it shares a little bit about, you know, why we decided to put all these pieces together. Because I grew up around, you know, a population very much in pain, cancer patients. But later on, and my father was a neuroradiologist. And so grew up around health, around doctors, but I was like that black sheep in the family. I was like, no way, I'm not going to go into medicine. I'm not going to be like them.
Famous last words.
Yeah, famous last words, exactly. So I ended up I was at DreamWorks. I was in their development department and doing like animation and traditional content. But it was there that I was really inspired by the virtual reality and new technology work we were doing there. And in VR, when I started diving into it, I realized that it had been used since the 1980s for pain management and for various therapies.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, that's like a long time.
VR was
VR since the 1980s. Yeah,
being applied for this.
Exactly.
Wow.
And it was like incredibly fascinating for me. And when I dove into it, I realized, holy crap, this is like the intersection of everything I'm interested in, like technology, but it's specifically for like anxiety and pain therapy. And then when we looked into it more, we realized, you know, VR is really powerful in of itself, but it's also just a platform. It's a platform in which you could deliver other types of validated therapies that could be helpful to a range of different types of patient populations. And when we discovered biofeedback, we were like, oh, wow. Biofeedback is something where you're learning how to calibrate your body. You're learning how to take control of your autonomic nervous system, but without the need of any type of medication or other invasive procedure to do that. And so basically we discovered if you married these two interventions into one very portable, accessible device, people could do it at home and learn how to control their nervous system, in addition, you know, to other things that they might be doing for their health, but really working on something very core to them each day, which is their nervous system. And then we put Flowly through case studies with a hospital here in Los Angeles. And then very quickly, we gained the support and award by the National Institutes of Health and National Institute on Drug Abuse
All right.
to actually put Flowly through randomized controlled clinical trials where we were able to study the science, this application on chronic back pain populations, et cetera. So that's basically a long-winded way to say that everything we do is about being science first, but also making sure that the way we design it is very accessible and is meeting each individual where they are at.
Yeah, I really want to get into accessibility because I think that's another huge component that you all are sitting on. I'm sure you know this, but I'm always worried, interested in, focused on, all right, this thing, this product, this service might be revolutionary for humans and their wellness, but how accessible is it? That's a whole nother field. I want to get there secondary. But first, we were talking about application. What kind of results are you all seeing, specifically with pain management and these like more acute applications?
Yeah, so in our studies, we actually looked at the reduction of opioid usage as a way of measuring increased
Huge
functionality.
benchmark. Wow.
Yeah.
So it's not just qualitative, it's actually medication reduction?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So it's voluntary medication reduction, which means the participant in the study had to voluntarily feel like, okay, I'm going to take less of my dose today without changing their prescription. And we saw in our initial case studies average 50% reduction in opioid usage.
And how long was the time period?
It was about 2 months. And then in our randomized controlled clinical trial, very similar results. And we're just wrapping that up right now. And of course, this is to say these are early studies. There's a lot more study that needs to be done. But I think it shows at least the potential of where technologies and therapies like this could go. And we hope that we're helping usher in that era.
Someone who, unbeknownst to me at the time, struggled with opiate addiction. My time in the service ended with due to a severe injury, and I was on narcotic pain medication for months and months and months and months. And I didn't know that I was just like hooked, really, until my body told me I was hooked. Wound up having a seizure, I gave myself a traumatic brain injury during the seizure, and it ultimately had an end in really cold turkey with the opiates, even though I was in still a lot of pain and still a lot of therapy and stuff to go through, but I kind of reached my max. So, I mean, I immediately am just thinking about if I had something like this, or somebody who is going through rehabilitation post-surgery or is in legitimate pain, these things sneak up on us, especially opiates. We don't realize how addictive and how tolerant they are, and we become so quickly.
Yeah.
Because we're like, well, I'm in pain. I need this. My doctor is advising, recommending, prescribing. But this is something I think if we can become mindful of, there are other alternatives out there to reduce and even eliminate while still keeping us in pain management.
Yeah. First of all, that's a terrifying experience you had.
Oh, yeah.
And
it was not cool.
Yeah, not chill.
Yeah.
But that is, I've heard similar stories in the space because especially when we first started, my co-founders and I, we worked at basically an opioid clinic every single day. So we were in the trenches with very, very chronic, heavy opioid users.
I can only imagine the things you guys saw. Wow.
And what I will say is I have a lot of feelings about the opioid epidemic. I think I don't necessarily think like opioids are inherently evil, and I don't think that we should eliminate them altogether. I think there is its place. I think as in all medicine and medication, like it can be part of the answer.
Totally agree.
But it is not the whole answer. And so what we're hoping to do with Flowly, that it is either a supplement or a substitute for you, depending on what your program is, and helping you wean off of opioids or reduce just the amount that you're taking. Because we understand like everybody is totally different. Everybody's journey is different. I've met patients, they need opioids to survive. And what's really frustrated me in this entire opioid epidemic sort of like journey is that a lot of the regulation just takes away a lot of people's life sources without providing an alternative, which is honestly very cruel. And so that's kind of a big inspiration for us in the beginning. It was like, how can we create something that is at least a tool that people can have in hand so they don't feel totally left in the dust, which is what a lot of patients felt, a lot of chronic pain patients felt during the opioid epidemic.
So then it leads me right into accessibility.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about how you've had a little bit more to start, at least for clinical trials and kind of evidence to support. You need that. We're in a clinic, we're in patient, we're in a facility. Not everybody can go to a facility. Yeah. And again, when I'm talking about products and services that can, even just in a little way or in ways like this, I think especially with mental health and pain management, even just a little bit of improvement equals huge quality of life improvement. Yeah. And I love how, this is accessible. I can just throw it on my head, which I did today. I can relax on my own couch. And in about 7 minutes, I, air quote here, went into session.
Yeah.
I won't even air quote. I did. I went into session. What is the focus you all have on accessibility in terms of education, awareness, cost? Because a lot of people who are in severe pain, I imagine they're struggling, or severe anxiety, they're struggling leaving the house.
100%. So I think about accessibility through a couple lenses. One is the cost. So, and that's a really, really big one. So right now we are out of pocket because, as you may know, going through the entire regulation and
all the best and most necessary services are out of pocket. It's
all the bureaucracy of getting something reimbursed takes many, many years, but we have started on that path already. That's why very early on we worked with the NIH. We're making sure that we spend that time and the resources to get there. So that is definitely on the horizon. That's my personal wish, is like getting this reimbursed. Amazing. So that's one big thing. The second big thing is early on we tested with mobile VR headsets and heavy, we call them HMD. So like with the computer in the actual headset. These are like Oculuses, like HTC Vives, things like that. And first, there's a big cost differentiator. Like obviously the Oculuses are much more expensive than a lightweight plastic mobile headset.
Drop your smartphone
where you drop your smartphone in. Yeah. But the second thing was we realized It's actually really hard for a lot of people to use these heavy VR headsets every single day, especially for our folks with anxiety or pain. Dexterity is an even issue, right? Like, how do you even log in on the headset? It was just, there's a lot of barriers to actual utilization. And so that's why we ended up with the phone version, because while it's like slightly lower fidelity, phones are actually really good nowadays. It is so much easier to use, and it makes us be able to provide it at a much, much lower cost. And so we look at it cost, we look at it in terms of design and usability. And then the other thing we think about is in the content itself. So, we build all the VR worlds ourselves in-house. All the worlds that you get to explore, like sitting on the beach with the aurora lights above you, traveling through like an intergalactic journey, space experience. We build all of that. And we've even put thought into, is it accessible for different populations with different backgrounds? So if I was growing up in urban Chicago, is an ocean environment as relaxing for me as if I grew up in like the Northeast? Yeah, exactly. And so we've actually worked with researchers and psychologists to create a library of different environments in VR that would be accessible for different populations.
This just got me thinking, have you thought about a user being able to provide their own photos for experience, like literally being able to tap into a place they've been or in earlier years brought them comfort and peace?
Yeah, that's a good question. Not actual photos, because the quality would be harder to control for that quality. But most of our worlds in Flowly today, and you get to, when you enter Flowly the app, you kind of work your way through a journey of worlds. They're all recommended or suggested by our users, who we call our heroes. So our heroes will like write into us or write in our community tab.
Oh, amazing. Okay. So kind of like community sourced.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Like, oh, I want to I remember that time I was like in a, tree cover, like next to a streaming brook and and we were like, okay, let's create that world. And my co-founder I met while I was at DreamWorks is like one of the most well-known, talented 3D animators and designers, and she creates all the worlds.
Amazing. Well, it also kind of got me thinking about, this is an amazing application. And if nothing else, not to downplay anything you have done and the science, clearly the science you have to prove it. But after going through my 2 experiences, I also realized, you know what I just did? I did nothing for 7 minutes. I shouldn't say nothing. Seemingly, I did nothing. But what I carved out time. I took a lot of really great breaths, and I just was in pure relaxation. So technology aside, VR world aside, that experience alone, I know will compound for a myriad of health benefits for a lot of people, especially when it comes to pain management, stress, anxiety. Thankfully, I think my stress and anxiety is in a pretty good place. I mean, I definitely got my good days and bad days, but I mean, even just for somebody like me, look, the world these days is not getting any easier, especially, people like us, entrepreneurs. You got a lot on your plate every day. I mean, just carving out a few minutes every day, getting some of that back in your life is greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, I always remind myself too, like I try to do Flowly myself every day, and it's hard to carve out that time, especially if you have a lot of other responsibilities. You're in a lot of stress. You have a lot of other things going on. I think what we've tried to work a lot on, but science first, but the next step is to create something that people will actually want to use every day. And I think that's something that's really underappreciated in the healthcare industry.
Adherence is everything.
Yeah, exactly. Compliance, adherence. Yeah. It is like the only thing that really matters at the end of the day. You could have something that can cure cancer if no one will take the proper like drug treatment or the right program. But if the pill
is too ugly or too big, like I'm not going to.
No one's going to do it. Exactly, yeah. And so it needs to be something that people will actually enjoy. And I think that's what we spent the majority of our time on. Besides the science, is how do we make it something that people actually like. And I think that's where our team's experience in like storytelling and animation really comes in, because we really believe that health experiences shouldn't be scary, it should actually be beautiful.
And it's way less scary at home, I think. Depending on your doctor's office, they come a long way. But, at home, you definitely have no white coat syndrome, no stress, no travel, no commute, none of that. Yeah. I want to ask you something too about kind of just this application in general. VR has been really on my radar a lot this year. Not so much in me seeking it out, but I'm seeing a lot of virtual reality applications come into play for a lot of different health and wellness, mindfulness applications. One in particular, I was sharing with you earlier, my wife is a nurse practitioner. She specializes in psychedelic medicine. She runs a ketamine-assisted psychotherapy clinic here in LA. And they recently began looking at, for integration purposes, like after you undergo an experience like that, it's a lot. Speaking from experience, it's a lot. You're processing a lot. You then have to kind of transition into, quote, real life again. So they're looking at ways, and a lot of, psychedelic and plant medicine companies are working on ways to integrate VR for greater integration purposes. So you can actually take ineffable and often intangible experiences, and through visualization and through, kind of proprioception, turn them into tangible applications and effable situations, if that's a word. I don't know an effable is a word. So I'm curious, my question there is really, what is the future of VR in terms of application for new health uses? Because we're talking mindfulness, meditation, pain management. They're going, psychedelic psychotherapy route. For people that really need it the most. Where do you see this technology going and serving people the most?
I really think that VR, its potential, we're just at the tip of the iceberg here in terms of potential. I think in terms of technology, it's going to shift a lot in terms of the hardware. Like, I don't think it's going to be VR. It's probably going to be XR, mixed reality of some sort. And
what's XR?
Basically like AR plus VR, where you can switch between being in the headset to overlaying an asset or a visual over real life.
Wow.
That's AR. So there's going to be a lot of shifts in technology here. And I think for me, the most important thing is what is actually going to benefit people. And above entertainment and like gaming, I think the real place where it's going to be adopted is by industry. And I think where you can actually prove its efficacy in health. There's a lot of applications I think are extremely promising around VR, around PTSD, vertigo treatment, what we're doing, and more. I think the key will be getting it to the point where it's easy for someone to integrate into their life, or especially around the hardware. And so that's something I'm really looking forward to for folks working on hardware, to get it smaller, easier to use. But it's no question to me, it's part of our future. It's just how, right? Because at the end of the day, VR is just a medium. It's just like your phone's a medium, right? Wi-Fi is just a medium. It's a tool. It's like, what do you actually put in the medium? What do you put in the platform to actually help people? I mean, that's just endless.
What about in terms of prevention or getting ahead of pain management, getting ahead of stress and anxiety? Have you all gone there yet? I mean, what would an experience look like for someone who's listening and maybe going, I don't have uncontrolled high stress and anxiety. I don't have uncontrolled high pain. What value could this serve me now?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I will say that I'd be hard-pressed to find someone nowadays that isn't living in pretty much a type of sustained
I just wanted to ask the question.
Mode.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree with you. Yeah.
And so I think this is really helpful to a lot of people.
If that's you, please write into the show right now.
I'd love to
know
meet
your
you.
tools.
I'd love to meet you. But so I think most people can benefit to learning how to auto-regulate their nervous system. I advocate for it to be something that is taught in like elementary school, to be honest with you. But I think that I think the really important thing is to figure out what types of tools are going to help benefit you in your daily life, and then making sure that it's actually built into your daily routine. And for a lot of people, that will be something like Lily, but for a lot of people, that's not, right? So I don't try to like prescribe people like one thing or another, but I think for people that don't have chronic illness, that don't have chronic pain, learning how to regulate your nervous system is probably the most important thing you can learn.
And I don't know if you said the exact word, but I think you were talking about longevity. Talking about using tools to help us, here and now, but ultimately improved quality of life now and adherence to those protocols and then maintaining those protocols or manipulating them as need be as we age or as our problems become less or more, that equates to quality of life long term. That, in my definition, is longevity. And I'm seeing a lot of new studies and evidence show now that people that are living 90s, 100s, centenarians, beyond quality of life, and people, all the centenarians, all the blue zones, always, they have one common thread, and that's community. Like we started off talking about. They have people or a person that they can go to and have had that for a while. And then beyond that, there are a lot of other things, but now we have the science and the longevity to show a big leading factor to longevity and quality of life is high HRV. So imagine working on something that's going to solve or remedy or put you on the path to solving a problem here and now and increase HRV, and then you keep that going long term. I mean, this, my statement, not yours, something like Flowly could literally add years to your life.
Yeah, I think Flowly can create a domino effect. And here, I'll give you a quick story. In one of our first case studies, we worked with a patient who's in his 60s. He was shot when he was 16 in the back. So he's had chronic pain for decades. And when we met him, he was actually just coming out of hospice. Like, he was basically on the verge of death. Wow. And when we met him, the first appointment, he came in on a wheelchair because his feet are inflamed 3 times the size of his actual foot due to neuropathy, so like neuropathic pain. And essentially, after working with him for about 2.5 months, where he did Flowly 2 to 3 times a week with us, the last day he walked in himself on a single point cane. Wow. And his physicians, his nurse practitioners told us his blood work also came back improved. He had also reduced his fentanyl patch by 50%.
This is everything we just talked about.
Yeah.
Wrapped up into one case study.
One case study. Wow. And a lot of people were like, that's kind of BS. Like, is that like a miracle? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, definitely it's not a miracle. It's literally very simple. It's just a domino effect of him feeling more in control of his body each day, where he felt more calm. He was able to sleep better, which is hugely important.
Game changer.
And he felt less pain. What did that cause? Well, that made him take his other prescriptions more on time. He actually went to his physical therapist for the first time in years. Wow. He started reducing his opioid usage, his medication, which allowed him to get his driver's license again because he couldn't drive for many years. And because he got his driver's license, he went to see his brother for the first time in like 15 years. So he reconnected with his family. And just all the biopsychosocial aspects of having a chronic illness or just being in a very traumatized state, he was able to improve all functionality of his life just by feeling a little bit better every day. And I think we always like dismiss that, like, that's kind of voodoo. Like, you know, you just feeling like a little bit mindful or good each day. The kind of domino effect that can have is incredible on somebody's life, especially for someone in like that patient. And so I always say, whether it's Flowly, whether it's something else, I honestly don't really care. Like, go find that thing that is going to help you get out of bed each day and feel more energy. Go read the books that are going to help you feel more optimized each day so that you can have that similar domino effect on the rest of your life.
That's like mic drop right there. So I'm so happy for that gentleman. That's incredible.
Yeah.
It makes me think of there were a handful of patients that I worked at my coaching practice that it really wasn't anything magical what we did. It was just simple things that we agreed upon would serve them, that they wound up doing consecutively, that helped us obtain the goal we set together. But them coming in and, you know, seeing lower body fat, higher muscle mass, or just a lower number on the scale, or getting off medications was the start. But everything else after that helped us finish our work together. And that was, I'm able to travel to see my kids, my grandchildren. I am taking walks with my spouse for the first time in months, years. I actually care about my appearance. I care about going out into the world, and I'm happy to do so. I mean, those are the ripple effects. Those are the dominoes that people don't even think of. Most people don't think of when they're setting upon a health journey, a wellness journey. They think they're just here to, let me use this one tool to solve this one problem that may or may not solve this problem. And then, okay, cool. Like, I'm one notch closer to health, right? But it opens up the floodgates.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think the thing that most peeves me about the healthcare industry, one of the things, there's a lot. One of the things is that everything in medicine nowadays works in silos. And that means like your, rheumatologist is not necessarily communicating with your neurologist, which is not necessarily understanding like alternative therapies you could be using. Like everything is in silos in your body. The things your body doesn't work in silos, right?
Your healthcare is compartmentalized. Why? Our body is made up of systems that are not compartmentalized. So why are we treating it that way?
Completely interwoven. And I think one thing that's always ignored is that we need to talk about most conditions, most disorders as under the biopsychosocial model, right? Like take pain, for example. Pain, there's physical pain, but a big symptom of pain is anxiety and depression. Another big one is if you ask a lot of chronic pain patients, what's the one thing you really want? It's socialization. So they're feeling extremely isolated. All these factors, the bio, the psychosocial, incredibly affect your everyday functionality and your overall health. And I think until you can understand yourself in the biopsychosocial model, you're not really seeing yourself holistically.
So true. It just makes me think about things that will help people. I can think back to several former patients of mine that would tell me I can't get out of the house, or I'm choosing to not get out of the house or travel as much to see like my granddaughter. But when my granddaughter comes to me for that day, for that hour, I forget that I'm in pain. I actually find myself inexplicably so moving around more, playing more. There's that biopsychosocial model you're talking about that has immense power. And we often don't realize it until after the fact. We can't explain what we're going to do. Maybe, all right, family's coming in town. I've got this social event coming up. What can I do? What do I need to do to actually be able to endure it? More so to actually be able to enjoy it. But after the fact, we're like, oh yeah, wow, I was present. I don't remember being in pain. I don't remember being in as much pain. Like, how do you bottle that and package it to people? It's through practices like this.
And I'll just add one thing to what you're saying, because I think it's really important. What you're saying is that experience of this, what we call in our practice, finding exceptions to painful experiences. So you might think, oh, like when I bend over, I'm going to have back pain. But you might find that when you garden, because gardening is like your hobby, you don't feel it as much, right? That's a positive experience around a typical behavior or movement that you think will trigger pain. And so we always encourage people to go find those experiences that are exceptions to pain or to anxiety or to stress, whatever might trigger what you're feeling. And it's important when you find that exception to keep doing it, because what you're doing is creating a new neural pathway. You're basically strengthening a neural pathway that's centered on something that's positive, that's something that's helpful to your health, something that's good. And then at the same time, you're atrophying, you're weakening the negative neural pathway around pain or stress or anxiety.
Rewiring systems, but also rewiring belief. If we believe we can or cannot do something over enough period of time, it becomes our reality. And if we keep telling ourselves, if I do this, it equals this, whether it does or doesn't, if we believe it to be true, it is true. And we'll wind up not doing the thing or doing the thing. Which makes me think of a unique question. Have you all had any experience or done any studies with Flowly using this VR modality in a unique environment other than relaxed, laying down on the couch? Are you actually bringing people into your example of gardening? Like, if I go garden, my back's going to hurt. What actually, if we brought the person out into the garden, just start with environment first, go through Flowly, so they're kind of getting that environmental cocoon. Have you all done anything like that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. We've had a lot of physicians and psychologists and therapists do that with their patients or clients. And so actually most people hear about us now today through a physician or therapist referral. And what we've heard through these practitioners and providers is that they will, for example, before a session, have the patient do Flowly. so that they're actually primed and open to whatever therapy is coming.
As like a precursor.
Exactly.
Amazing.
And then some will do it after to help them decompress, right?
Kind of like the integration I was telling you about with psychotherapy.
Exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
Wow.
And so it's Flowy's in a lot of clinics now where it's being utilized in that way. And we've heard creative applications, around addressing phobia or addressing certain traumas where they will bring it into real life or certain experiences.
I feel like I could keep going down so many rabbit holes here, so many unique applications and experiences. And you clearly, know your product very, very well. And also beyond that, I hear that you know people really well. You know what people need, what they want, and like what actually we're after. Healing, connection, and then some way to kind of blend it all together. But before we wrap up, we haven't actually talked about what is the Flowly experience. Like when I put on the goggles, what am I experiencing? What is happening? What is the user experience here?
So Flowly is actually designed to be a platform. And the VR and the biofeedback is a tool in that platform. So what does that actually mean? Like Flowly is an app where once you go onto it, we actually host events and workshops and even bubbles, which are small, safe groups where people can connect with one another, learn health-focused resources and tools, etc.
And while you're doing this, you got to tune in, everybody. Watch the video. I'm going to just throw this on, and so you can see exactly what it takes. Yeah. It's super easy, super simple. And I won't put my phone in, but I'm in Flowly. So what is going on up here, and what is this device here?
Yeah, so then when you sign up for that membership, we send you this headset and this sensor that you're wearing right now to your home. And then you pop your phone into the headset, the sensor on your ear or finger, and you enter a world that is like beautiful and relaxing, like sitting on the beach with the aurora lights above you or wandering through the bamboo forest. But at the same time, you're actually seeing your real-time heart rate through that sensor. And we're teaching you through a breathing guide, that resonant frequency breathing we talked about, and the voiceover and some of the gamification in the world, how to manipulate your heart rate to send your nervous system into rest and digest mode, your parasympathetic mode. And then as you do better and better, because we're able to see that through the biofeedback, you've entered your flow state, which is where you're relaxed, you're focused.
Your Flowly state.
Your Flowly state. And the world around you will change. So like more constellations will form in the sky, more birds will fly across. We have ones that are like literal games where things will actually grow. And it's a very gentle, but also very visceral way to understand when you're improving. And then how do you build on that improvement to get better and better. Yeah. And then after, you can choose between a 5, 10, 15, or 20-minute session each day. You can go into your data portal and actually see physiologically how did that affect your heart rate? How did that affect your flow score? What is your relaxation looking like in the data itself? And that's really important because we want to be data focused.
Speaking of data, you might laugh at me, but I knew that this was going to track this information, but while I was doing it, I actually set a tracker on my Whoop and my Apple Watch for a mind and body and meditation. I'm always curious because it's like, Chase, what's the point? But I'm always curious as to one thing is going to measure one thing, but how differently are the measurements, and how well are they going to speak to each other? I don't know if it's actually going to make any difference in my numbers or feedback, but it also just got me thinking about what's another way that I can track this experience. Not everybody needs to do that. You don't need to track one experience in 3 ways, but
no, we have a small group of like biohackers, in our community, and like we've all tested. We have all the wearables. We're like, okay, how's my data different from one wearable to the other? Like what we're tracking. So I think there's a lot of really cool things. As an aside, what we also find out, because being in the industry, is like all these sensors track data differently.
Oh, absolutely.
And they smooth the data differently. Yeah. So that's an interesting part of the equation. But yeah, certainly I think I love these different wearables. I love to track and see how my body changes. What I'm finding for most people that don't take that next step, it's like, but what do you actually do with that data, right? And then I think this is kind of our way of being, okay, here are the steps you do, follow the instructions, we'll teach you.
Well, this has been fantastic. I have thoroughly enjoyed the Flowly experience. You all's research and clinical evidence and just real world application is very impressive. So I'm excited to see where people can latch on to Flowly, inpatient, at home. It's a really cool experience, everybody. Definitely check it out. I'll have all the information listed down in the show notes and video notes. But before I get to my final question, how long has Flowly been out now?
So we launched publicly last year out of this accelerator called Y Combinator.
So about a year and a half old now? Okay. Where do you think this will go in the next year? What is it, more of the same application for pain management, stress, and anxiety? Or are you already getting enough research or feedback from people going, hey, maybe this is actually a really needed, wanted application?
The way I track that is by how many inbound I get from physicians in different patient populations, and we're already working with and designing studies for quite a spectrum of different populations, from like people with lupus to basically various autoimmune conditions and disorders, to people coming out of surgery, to even people in the perinatal process, so before, during, and after labor, to help control for pain and anxiety. Yeah. So there's a lot of places that we're exploring, and I think there's a lot of potential for. But my mission with Flowly essentially is to empower people with chronic illness and invisible illness to feel and live better each day. So I think we're at the early stages of that, but with the help of our current community, I think we're starting to take shape and understand how do we better serve them each day. And
would you say kind of a invisible illness? Are we talking about mental health?
Yeah. I think invisible illness is basically you look okay, but you don't feel okay, right? And there's like a lot of disorders and actual conditions and illnesses that fall under that. But I have friends and family that have like eating disorders or really bad anxiety issues or even sleep issues that I think fall under invisible illness.
Absolutely. Even just lack of or poor self-confidence, no self-love, heightened negative self-talk. I mean, even things, in my opinion, that haven't turned into yet, or maybe even won't, an actual diagnosis. Just we're right on the cusp of these things turning into chronic, unwanted experiences, you know?
Yeah.
Which brings me to my last question. A chronic experience I want in my life is to keep learning, is to keep becoming aware of these things in my biopsychosocial model, my mind, body, spirit, everything, to keep, to maintain, but also what can I optimize? What can help me move forward in life, to live a life ever forward? When you hear those two words, what does that mean to you? How do you interpret that? And maybe even how can what you do and how you do it through Flowly help others do the same?
I think one thing that I've become increasingly started to believe in the past, I would say like 5 years, is to enjoy and trust the process. And I think if I could like ever forward in that way, but really enjoying and appreciating each part of my journey and process, I think I will have lived the life that I wanted to. Because I think when I was growing up, I was very ambitious. There was a lot of things I wanted to do. And I thought that my life would look different or be marked by certain chapters or achievement. But when you start to do things, you realize like the dopamine rush of that moment doesn't actually last, but actually all the memories and the experiences building up to it was even more exciting and more interesting. And I think about that for my own life in terms of like my career, my relationships, my family. But I also think about that in terms of health, because the reason we call our users heroes is because we really believe they're the hero of their journey. And the journey itself is kind of where you're at, like where there's no finish line for a lot of people. It's all about like, how do you find the tools and the experiences that will make you enjoy your journey, where you feel like you are the hero of your life. Yeah. And I think that, to me, is what Everforward would stand for.
There's never a right or a wrong answer. I always appreciate everybody's interpretation. So that was beautiful. I really enjoyed that one. Thank you. And I could not agree more. It's just, I'll even take it a step further and say a phrase that's really been top of mind for me and very necessary for me the last couple of years has been, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And it sounds, when I would think about, because Ever Forward is my life, it's the show, it's the brand, it's the mantra, it's this thing that my father instilled in us for years. It's like, well, if you're not moving forward, then what are you doing? Are you staying stagnant? But sometimes we need to really just take a pause, and it's more than just trusting the process. I think if there's a difference between trusting the process and really believing that where I am is where I'm supposed to be. Because I feel like that's a lot more kind of taking the power back, and I am here, maybe not because of my own choice, but I'm here because I'm supposed to be, and I'm owning this, versus maybe trusting the process is I'm just kind of going with it. I think you can have value in both, but in really owning where I am right here, right now, and it's where I'm supposed to be, the more I can be mindful of that compounds, and I look back, like I've moved forward, so I've been able to propel ever forward by owning each one of those individual moments.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's super powerful. That's why I think actually having fun where you are.
That's the best.
In each moment, enjoying it. Yeah. Appreciating where you are, like you're saying. I mean, if you can do that, what else do you need?
And I'll give you and the listeners a little other biohack. Speaking of having fun, one way that I have found, like I can actually guarantee, I can call it, to increase my HRV is I have very intentional downtime, intentional fun. Every time now when I take a chunk of time and I spend it, usually it's both things are happening here. It's I'm spending quality time with my wife or our friends and family, like meaningful relationships, community, and or outside. When that happens, my recovery the next day is significantly higher. My HRV is significantly higher. And so there's something to it, there's something to being in a moment, having fun that our bodies like really love and receive.
There's also certain fun activities where it directly stimulates your vagus nerve, which increases your HRV. And I'll just add 2 notes to that. One is humming and the other is singing, which for a lot of people is really fun.
Wasn't expecting that.
I'm like giving you some practical tips.
Interesting.
But singing and humming directly stimulate your vagus nerve, which helps with your HRV.
Interesting. So maybe there's something to it. Kind of just some connecting some dots. Anytime I do a yoga practice and there's the Om, I mean, that's really just a small clip of a hum.
Yeah.
Om or
We actually have a humming world in Flowly where we can hear your humming and then feed it back into your experience. But yeah, humming is a very, very powerful way to stimulate your vagus nerve. So there's a lot of fun things you could do, but you just gotta take the time to go explore it.
So tune in next time. We'll have Humley on the show.
And it will be at a karaoke bar.
Well, Celine, this was fantastic. Thank you so much. Like I said, we'll have all of Flowly's information, your information in the show notes and video notes for everybody. But where can they go to check out what you got going on, to learn more about Flowly?
Yeah, so our website, www.flowly.world.
Okay.
And then one thing I'll just shout out is all of our members that get the kit, you get access to a health guide that you can actually text or call for advice or tips or even help getting started. Because we help everyone from like people in their 20s to their 80s.
Yeah.
I think having that real person connection is really helpful.
Yeah, I love that too. I love how you all didn't lose sight of, it's a tech product, tech company, VR. When I think of it, it's very kind of futuristic and self-exploratory. And we're using tech and tools and technology, but we need that humanization component still. We need a person.
Human. Yeah.
We are still human.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop talking. I can keep going, but thank you so much.